We were not designed to feel pain. We were not designed to feel corruption and injustice. And our design is to shift away from that as quickly as possible, which is why a lot of people that have unresolved trauma or don't know how to communicate in a healthy way end up self-medicating. And that leads them to addiction. That leads them to seeking comfort in worldly things, because it's easier to do that. And the enemy will lead you to those things easily, especially if he traps you at a young age. Welcome to Arise My Love, where my mission is to equip and empower you to break free from toxic cycles, guiding you toward a life of fulfillment and joy. I'm your host, Angela Thorne, and my journey wasn't easy. For 20 years, I was trapped in addiction and exploitation, all stemming from a childhood filled with rejection and abuse. As a survivor of abuse, exploitation, and sex trafficking, I found myself in desperate need of something different. Ever since 2018, I have been on a journey of intentional daily healing that has led me to be radically changed forever. Now I'm committed to helping other women find the same freedom. Join me as we embark on this transformative journey together. Good morning and welcome to episode 2 of Arise My Love. I think I have built up enough anticipation to where I can just jump right into it this morning. So as I mentioned in episode 1, I was molested at the age of 5, and that left me extremely vulnerable to the enemy coming into my life and wreaking havoc. And that's exactly what happened. My innocence was broken. I started looking through a very broken lens of what intimacy looked like. I didn't really have that modeled for me, as my parents' relationship was rocky pretty much from the beginning of my life. I didn't really have a grasp or a gauge for what healthy relationship truly looked like. I'm told that there was a time the relationship was good. I just don't have a memory of that. I think it was really early on in my life. From the time I can remember, they were very distant with one another and basically just not around. Both of them worked for the greater part of my life, leading to my older siblings watching over me and caring for me. And that was another aspect of my life that left me extremely vulnerable. And before I get too far into this, I just want to say that I honor my mother and father. I love them to the center of my core. I respect everything that they're about and that they are. And by no means in any part of this podcast or when my book is released do I want you to ever read my story and see anything other than the respect and the honor that I have for my parents. They're both still alive and well, and I have a wonderful relationship with them. And they bless what I'm doing here with Arise My Love and sharing my story, because honestly, it is a story of redemption and a story of hope. And no matter how hard we try to protect our children and create this world that we want them to be brought up in, there are going to be many times in their lives that they have to go through their own trials, that they have to go through their own tribulations in order for the Lord to shape and mold them into the person that they were called to be, that they were destined to be. And yes, I had to go through a grieving process of all the things that I endured as a child. And I went through the steps of grief, and there were seasons of anger, there were seasons of sadness, and I did have to go through that with my parents. And there was a time where I was at this crossroads in my healing journey where I had the decision to take responsibility of my own healing and my own forgiveness towards them. Or I could have chosen to continue to blame them for the things that I went through and the things that I was enduring as an adult. And every single one of us will come to that crossroads because there's always somebody out there that has hurt us, whether it's our parents. Usually, I'm just going to say it's our family of origin. It's the people who raised us. It's the people that we did life with the most. There's going to come a time that you face or that you walk up to that crossroads of saying, okay, enough is enough. I can forgive and I can start healing from all of those things. And that doesn't always mean mending those relationships. It doesn't always mean physically face to face with them, giving forgiveness. Most of the time, I would even bet to say that 100% of the people who are going through addiction or mental health issues or gender confusion or body dysmorphia, eating disorders, the people that are stuck in toxic cycles, abuse, all the things, endured some type of trauma in their childhood that is unhealed, that is unresolved. That is the key. We have to face those things. We have to relive them even. And there's so many ways that you can do that in a healthy way in community with others. We'll get into that in another episode. There is going to come a time for every single person where they are facing, I can either continue living this way, I can continue blaming the world, I can continue blaming my parents, I can continue blaming my siblings, I can continue blaming that person that hurt me, and be stuck in a victim mindset. Or I can go this route and I can start facing all of the hurt and all of the pain. I can start feeling the pain, because that's usually what we're all running from, is that feeling of pain. We were not designed to feel pain. We were not designed to feel corruption and injustice. And our design is to shift away from that as quickly as possible, which is why a lot of people that have unresolved trauma or don't know how to communicate in a healthy way end up self-medicating. And that leads them to addiction. That leads them to seeking comfort in worldly things, because it's easier to do that. And the enemy will lead you to those things easily, especially if he traps you at a young age. That was my story. I got trapped at a young age. The enemy began to skew my view of love, skew my view of intimacy, and it unfortunately led me down a very dark path. I was first molested by friends of mine, girls either my age or around my age. And it wasn't just with one person, it was many. From the time I was 5 years old to 12 years old, not consistently, but sporadically throughout those years, there were interactions that I had with girls around my age where they were likely reenacting things that were happening to them. I will provide statistics on my website that you can go check out. My reality was the girls in my life whom I saw as friends, who I saw as people that I could trust, were crossing boundaries. And the main thing I'd like to rein in for people when talking about this subject is that it was done in secret. Me and these girls didn't talk about what was happening. It was typically done during either like sleepovers at night, or it was happening during role-playing games. And these boundaries would be pushed little by little till they were fully crossed, almost like grooming techniques. But these children were so young that there's no way they knew these things or knew how to do these things without having learned them elsewhere. We didn't discuss like, oh, well, that just happened, that was weird, or there was no room for processing what was going on. And a child's brain is not developed enough to be able to process sexual interaction. It's just not. And I was left to isolate in all of those things. And Unfortunately, I was never spoken to about these things. I had no idea that what was going on was wrong. It felt wrong. I pretty much knew it was wrong by instinct, but I was never given the opportunity to talk about it. That narrative was never opened. And so that's why my passion is to educate people about what this looks like and what it can look like in a child's life. And there are signs and red flags that this might be going on. Again, I can provide those resources on my website. I don't want to take up my time here to go too far into the signs and the statistics and all those things. I just want to share my experiences with you. But it's my passion to educate parents and grandparents and people who care for kids how important it is to have an open narrative with your kiddos about these types of topics. I know they're seen as taboo. I know generations before mine, I'm a millennial. I know the generations prior to mine were taught that we don't talk about that, but that has created the secrecy around it. So it's so important that we start having these conversations with our kids as young as possible, as young as they are able to understand language. And I would even encourage, like, even as young as 2, start teaching your kids what safe touch looks like, what safe conversations look like. Again, there's so many resources out there that I can provide on my website, but there is age-appropriate ways to have these conversations. And if you start them so young, it's just going to be normal. They're going to feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you about things. And if it does happen to them, and the world we live in today, especially with technology advancements and the fact that most children have a device in their hand and they have access to the online world, it's unfortunately not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's just when it's going to happen. When they're sexually solicited online through personal messaging on a game they're playing, you want them to feel comfortable to come to you and talk to you about what's going on in their lives. And so if you create that safety net at such a young age, then it's going to be inevitable that they'll come to you with these things. Now, don't beat yourself up if it's like, well, my children are grown or my children are already older. That's totally okay. Like I said, there is age-appropriate ways to have this conversation, and it's never too late to start. It is never too late to begin that conversation, no matter how awkward it is, because I will tell you, it can be awkward. Usually there's a lot of fumbling around words. You're trying to figure out how to say things. And again, there's a lot of resources wonderful organizations have put together to have these conversations. So I'll be happy to share those with you all. But I really encourage you to just push through that uncomfortable feeling, because eventually you'll get through it. You'll get over that little hump of feeling awkward. Kids too, and it will begin to become just a normal conversation, and it doesn't have to be drawn out. But my whole point is I have to stress the importance of normalizing these conversations in your home. That is what's potentially going to save your children from going through the traumatic things that I did. Most of the time when a child is molested and abused, it is by somebody that they know, and it's somebody that they're comfortable around. It could be a family member, a close friend, somebody that they have gotten to know well on the internet that has gained their trust through the grooming process. So it's very important for you to be vigilant, but it's also important for you to have this conversation with your kids. I encourage you to find it in your heart to empower yourselves to have these conversations with the children in your life. It's just so important to know the signs, and it's so important to understand how to have these conversations. It could save a life. And that's my mission, is to just empower people to step out of their comfort zone, because I know the topics that I'm touching on and the topics that I will be touching on are extremely vulnerable, and they're extremely hard to process and comprehend. But my hope is that you at least have this little spark in you, that spark of curiosity that wants to learn more and go deeper and potentially start having these conversations with your kids. I want to also say, if anything that I've talked about today, it was your reality. So if you heard something that I spoke about that perhaps triggered something in your childhood, it's never too late to start healing from those wounds. And I want to encourage you to step into the possibilities of facing those memories and stepping into a place of forgiveness. And I never recommend to do that alone. I highly believe in the power of healing with community. Typically, community is what hurt us. However, our design is to operate in community. So I encourage you to plug into a community that will help you along the way of healing. I'll add those resources of what I've done and what I recommend. There's a wonderful program called Celebrate Recovery that is designed to walk people through the healing journey. And it's a great first stepping stone, is what I like to call Celebrate Recovery. It was the first landing place for me when I was ready to start my healing journey, and I highly recommend it. There is a website that you can go to find the nearest Celebrate Recovery meeting to you, and I'll throw that on my website as well. Let's recap everything that I've talked about. So I shared my story of where the enemy snared me between the ages of 5 and 12 and started skewing my view of love and intimacy through friends that I hung out with, and the molestation that was taking place, and the way it was separating me from not only my design and my purpose and my connection with the Lord, but it was also disconnecting me from my parents and my family, and putting a wall up between me and those that I'm supposed to be closest to, and the trust. And we talked about the importance of starting these conversations with your kids, or with your siblings, with your nieces and nephews. And if you get anything from this podcast today, I want it to be that. So make sure you hop on over to arisemylove.com to review all of the resources that I have mentioned on today's episode. On the next episode, I'll continue on my journey of where I used to be, what led me to addiction and toxic cycles, and I'll see you then. Love you. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.